Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas. I'm Molly Gambhir. Let's get started. For months now, ties between India and Canada have been frozen in time. Now, the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has become the first world leader to try and meddle in India's internal affairs. Just a few hours ago, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was delivering an address to the people of his country where he chose to speak about India's farmers' protests. India has slammed Justin Trudeau's statement, calling his remarks ill-informed. The Canadian leader is not the only one trying to misuse India's internal matter as political fodder. UK MPs have also echoed Justin Trudeau's statement in an attempt to please their vote bank. What locus standi do they have to comment on a protest taking place on Indian soil? It is India's internal matter. On Gravitas tonight, we look at how these politicians might be going too far in their political opportunism. We decode the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's rather complicated relationship with India and take a look back at why things have shaped up the way they have. I am Molly Gambhir, also on the show for you tonight. 11 months since the Wuhan virus unleashed havoc across the world. More details emerge on how China tried to cover up the health crisis. It is a Gravitas special report. The Twitter war of words between Australia and China is only heating up 24 hours after Australia asked Twitter to take down the image in question. We tell you why questions are being raised over Twitter's stance on the matter. It is a culinary clash over kimchi. South Koreans and Chinese spar over the cabbage dish. We tell you what's cooking. Justin Trudeau is not your average world leader. He enjoys a level of global popularity that rivals rock stars. He is a leader who could probably charm his way through a negotiation. That is how the world knows Justin Trudeau. But here in India, the Canadian Prime Minister has a different kind of reputation. He has been accused of encouraging separatism against India on Canadian soil. His office invited a convicted terrorist for a reception. Now, Justin Trudeau has become the first foreign leader to meddle in India's internal affairs. Last week, thousands of Indian farmers launched a protest. This is against 3 new farmer laws brought in by the government of India. The protest continues. The Indian government has opened a dialogue with the farmers. Ultimately, this is about laws made in India by the Indian government for the Indian farmer. Foreign leaders have no business talking about it. Despite knowing that, Justin Trudeau and some other foreign leaders decided to weigh in on India's domestic issues. Why? Because they want to cater to their own vote banks at home. And that's exactly what Justin Trudeau is trying to do. Listen in to what he said on Guru Purab, the statement that kick-started this entire row.
I would be remiss if I didn't start also by recognizing the news coming out of India about the protest by farmers. The situation is concerning, and we're all very worried about family and friends. I know that's the reality for many of you. Let me remind you, Canada will always be there to defend the right of peaceful protest. We believe in the importance of dialogue, and that's why we've reached out through multiple means directly to the Indian authorities to highlight our concerns.
If you heard those words carefully, you would realize that the Canadian Prime Minister was addressing the Canadian Punjabi community, an influential voting bloc. In the last election, 18 Sikhs were elected to the Canadian Parliament. Just for reference, 13 Sikhs were elected to India's lower house last year. Trudeau's own cabinet has 4 Sikhs, so the community has a voice at the highest levels of power. But that does not mean that they get a voice in India's internal affairs. India has made that amply clear with a statement of its own. The Ministry of External Affairs in India said this, and I'm quoting now, "We have seen some ill-informed comments by Canadian leaders relating to farmers in India. Such comments are unwarranted, especially when pertaining to the internal affairs of a democratic country. It is also best that diplomatic conversations are not misrepresented for political purposes." That statement is not just for Justin Trudeau, but for all those leaders abroad who chose to weigh in on those protests in India. And this includes Canadian opposition leader Jagmeet Singh, whose party started a petition on its website calling on Justin Trudeau to make a statement on the protests in India. Seems like they have got their wish. There were other Canadian lawmakers who issued similar statements recently. Some lawmakers from the UK made similar noises as well. What purpose do these voices serve? These are not Indian MPs. They don't have a vote within the Indian Parliament. They have no power to influence the laws made in India. Then why are they issuing such statements? The answer is simple: to pander to their vote banks. Why wouldn't Justin Trudeau express concern when Islamists held Islamabad hostage during protests against Emmanuel Macron, or over the situation in Thailand where citizens were targeted by the police for protesting against the monarchy? Justin Trudeau is catering to the voters at home, something that got him into trouble a few years ago. Across the world, Justin Trudeau is considered as the face representing the liberal order, but the Canadian Prime Minister does not enjoy the same rock star popularity in India. Our next report tells you why.
Justin Trudeau seemed to have everything in place for his trip to India back in 2018. The Trudeau family greeted everyone with a namaste on arrival. His outfits were on point. There was the quintessential visit to the Taj Mahal as well. But those photogenic moments failed to charm the Indian leadership. As one Canadian news outlet described it, Trudeau's visit to India was a disaster, because the Canadian Prime Minister was given a cold shoulder by the Indian leadership. The snub was quite apparent when Trudeau visited Gujarat, the home state of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Since becoming Prime Minister, Narendra Modi has hosted many world leaders at his home turf. From Chinese President Xi Jinping to Shinzo Abe of Japan, and Donald Trump, who was given a grand reception in Ahmedabad. But Prime Minister Modi did not greet Trudeau in Gujarat, and for good reason. Despite India's concerns, Canada has done little to contain Sikh separatists within its society. The entire trip was plagued by another controversy. Jaspal Atwal, a separatist, was extended an invite for Trudeau's reception in Mumbai. Atwal was convicted for the attempted murder of a Punjab minister in 1986. A Canadian judge had once called Atwal a terrorist. The same man was later seen posing with Sophie Trudeau, the wife of the Canadian Prime Minister. It was an embarrassment that could have been easily avoided, but Trudeau's team made it worse by blaming India. During a background briefing to journalists, a source from the Trudeau government suggested rogue elements within India may have engineered the invitation, just to embarrass the Canadian government. Later, a report claimed that it was Trudeau's office that had extended the invite. A few months after the visit, Justin Trudeau tried to poke fun at the widely criticized visit.
Nothing else happened. Nothing at all. We didn't go to India. And I tried, right? I told my team, look, I don't remember the India trip. So I told them I repressed the entire trip, and they said, that's okay. We went ahead and made a slideshow for you. Aren't I lucky? So let's rip off that Band-Aid. Can we roll it, please? Okay.
But no one was laughing in India. India's ties with Canada remain frozen in time. And Trudeau's latest statements on the farmer protests are unlikely to make things better. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Justin Trudeau's comments are not only ill-informed, they are hypocritical as well. Canada is part of a bloc at the World Trade Organization that is questioning India's agriculture support practices. It happened in October. Reportedly, during a meeting of the Committee on Agriculture, Canada, alongside the European Union and the United States, levied a serious charge. They claimed India's trade practices are not transparent enough. They wanted India to produce more data about the trade of agriculture goods in the country. Canada, in particular, asked several questions about the Prime Minister Kisan Program, also known as a Prime Minister's Farmers Tribute Fund. Under this initiative, the Indian government has promised to provide 6,000 rupees or $84 as minimum income support to the farmers. Eligible farmers get these payments in 3 installments. Since its inception, 10 crore families have been given more than 94,000 crores under this scheme. Canada grilled India at the WTO about this scheme. Some of the questions asked were, could India clarify who is eligible for this program and what are the criteria that determined eligibility for payment? Could India indicate if payment levels are determined by income of producers, and if so, what is the defined and fixed base period used to define eligibility? Reportedly, Canada raised doubts over an insurance scheme as well, under which the government of India settled claims worth more than 5,000 crores during this pandemic. Canada feels this kind of subsidy that helped farmers during the pandemic may not be eligible under WTO rules. There is more. Back in 2018, the United States filed a case against India at the WTO. It was over certain export subsidies worth more than $7 billion. The subsidy helped a range of manufacturers, like producers of steel products, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, information technology products, textiles, apparel. America argued India has violated WTO norms. Canada participated in this case as a third party. The WTO panel had ruled against India in the trade dispute. What do all these facts tell you about Canada? It claims to be concerned about the rights of Indian farmers while contesting the very subsidies that could help them survive this pandemic. It fights India over export concessions. It also fights India on market price support. On your screen now, it's a 2019 submission by the US and Canada to the WTO. It accuses India of dramatic underreporting of market price support for pulses and lentils. What is market price support? Subsidies, minimum support prices, those rules that ensure the Indian farmer gets the price that they deserve for their produce. Such schemes are critical for ensuring a level playing field for all farmers in India. Canada opposes these subsidies, which is why we say the Canadian Prime Minister has no locus standi when it comes to the new farmer laws in India. Trudeau says he is concerned about the farmers in India, but his government challenges the very subsidies that benefit them at the WTO. That is the reason why Trudeau's statement smacks of hypocrisy. 11 months since the Wuhan virus breached China's borders, some documents have been leaked from the Hubei Center for Disease Control. They talk about an undisclosed influenza that was spreading at the same time when COVID-19 had just been reported. They also reveal how China presented optimistic figures to its citizens that were far from the reality on the ground. All that and more in our next report.
23rd January 2020. The ferocious coronavirus is spreading in Wuhan. The city is overwhelmed by the rise in cases. An unprecedented lockdown is imposed. Wuhan's 11 million residents are ordered to stay at home. The Chinese regime begins an aggressive campaign to control all information. Armed policemen replace civilians on the streets. Journalists reporting from Ground Zero begin to disappear, and lab samples of the coronavirus are destroyed. It has been 10 months. The memories of the lockdown are yet to fade. The Chinese regime yet to face any accountability, and the world yet to discover the full extent of China's cover-up. Now, a string of shocking revelations have emerged in a leak from where it all began. 117 pages of classified documents have been leaked from the Hubei Provincial Center for Disease Control and Prevention. It is the most significant leak since the beginning of the pandemic, and it reveals numerous inconsistencies in what was happening and what was revealed to the public. Undisclosed early December influenza, at the same time when the Wuhan virus is believed to have emerged. The documents show another health crisis was unfolding. The Hubei province was reportedly dealing with a significant influenza outbreak. The outbreak was felt most severely in Yichang and Xianing. Wuhan, the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak, was the third worst hit. The documents show the outbreak was not disclosed to the public. It added enormous levels of additional stress on the already stretched healthcare system. The two outbreaks may or may not be linked, but the fact that China revealed no information regarding the magnitude of the influenza spike raises questions. The documents also show a wide range of COVID-19 data on two specific days, February 10th and the 7th of March. But the figures released for these dates by the Chinese regime don't match at all. On the 10th of February, China reported 3,911 new confirmed cases nationwide. But the documents show that Hubei province was circulating a different total of 5,918 new cases. On March 7th, China reported 2,986 deaths in the Hubei province, but as per the internal documents, the figure was apparently 3,456. The discrepancies are said to be the result of China's recurring instinct of suppressing bad news. The revelations are plenty. The cover-up is brazen. In Wuhan, those who lost family members due to China's lies are still struggling to move on.
To be honest, who caused this situation in the first place? The government cannot shirk blame, not when the situation has not improved. But whether the government has improved or not has nothing to do with me. Nothing at all. Now how should I put it? I couldn't care less about the government at present.
If the Wuhan government, the authorities had known this virus is human to human and contagious and told us to protect ourselves and go out as little as possible, just like the way they're doing now, the tragedy could have been avoided. But we got infected without knowing anything about the virus.
The message from the people of Wuhan is clear. China lied, and people died. Bureau Report, WION. World is one.
Meanwhile, China's war of words with Australia is not ending anytime soon. For those of you unaware, Australia is seeking an apology from China for what it calls a falsified and repugnant Twitter post about the Australian army. China, being China, has not offered any apologies. In fact, it is only adding to the bluster, telling Australia that it should be ashamed of itself. Now, amid this quarrel, questions are being raised on the role of Twitter. Why hasn't the social media giant taken any action yet? It has neither removed that tweet nor fact-checked it. Our next report tells you more.
November 19th, Canberra. The Chief of Australia's Defence Force apologised for war crimes committed by Australian troops.
To the people of Afghanistan, on behalf of the Australian Defence Force, I sincerely and unreservedly apologise for any wrongdoing by Australian soldiers. I've spoken directly with my Afghan counterpart, General Zia, to convey this message.
The apology was meant for the people of Afghanistan, but it came as fodder for China's wolf warriors to unleash propaganda against the Australian government. On Monday, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian posted this image on Twitter, claiming to show an Australian soldier holding the knife to the throat of an Afghan child. The aim was to try and discredit Australia's brave acknowledgement of the wrongdoings. Australia lashed out at China, calling the image falsified and the post repugnant.
The post made today, the repugnant post made today, of an image, a falsified image, of an Australian soldier threatening a young child with a knife, a post made on an official Chinese government Twitter account, posted by the Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Lijian Zhao, is truly repugnant. It is deeply offensive to every Australian who has served in that uniform, every Australian who serves in that uniform today.
It's been 24 hours since Australia's warning, but China is yet to take down the image. What about Twitter? Forget removing the image. Twitter hasn't even tagged the tweet with a mere misleading or disputed band. This is despite Prime Minister Scott Morrison's request to the tech giant to do so.
We are also seeking its removal immediately and have also contacted Twitter to take it down immediately. It is a false image and a terrible slur on our great defence forces and the men and women who've served in that uniform for over 100 years.
For months, Twitter has been fact-checking the US president. In the 48 hours after US election day, Twitter added warning labels to at least 9 tweets by Donald Trump, cautioned that the messages might be misleading. We are now in December, but the fact-checking hasn't stopped. Trump's posts and retweets as latest as Monday have a misleading label attached. The social media giant seems to be conveniently using its fact-checking where it wants to. In March this year, Twitter removed 2 tweets by Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro in which he questioned COVID-19 quarantine measures. The platform said the tweets violated its rules. The same month, Twitter also removed a tweet by Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in which he mentioned an unverified antidote to COVID-19. The social network said the tweet violated its rules on COVID-19 guidelines. But what about an image that is reportedly fake? As this provocative post by China's Zhao Lijian continues to do the rounds, all the platform has done is add a warning for sensitive content. Twitter's fact-checkers sitting in Silicon Valley are taking decisions that impact billions. But who is keeping a check on their biases? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
We have been reporting on how India is trying to draw its neighbours closer, neighbours like Nepal. New Delhi and Kathmandu have been trying to fix bilateral ties. The Indian Foreign Secretary was in Kathmandu a few days ago. From Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli to President Bidya Devi Bhandari, almost every high-profile leader in Nepal met Mr. Harshvardhan Shringla. This visit concluded on the 27th of November, that is Friday. On the 29th of November, the Chinese Defence Minister Wei Fenghe landed in Kathmandu. Accompanying him were at least 24 Chinese delegates. Reports say Wei Fenghe had several things on his mind and plate, but most of it could not be savoured. All that he received from the Nepalese leadership was a big fat Himalayan snub. Let's tell you what I'm talking about. Wei Fenghe wanted to have a bilateral with the Defence Minister of Nepal, who happens to be the one and only KP Sharma Oli. Did the bilateral take place? It was declined under protocol. All the Chinese Defence Minister received under protocol was a courtesy call. And this is just the beginning. Next, the Chinese delegation proposed a meeting with the Deputy Prime Minister of Nepal, Ishwar Bokrail. He was earlier the Defence Minister before KP Sharma Oli took over. Did this meeting take place? It did not. Even this request by the Chinese delegation stood rejected. Embarrassed, Wei Fenghe had to settle for a bilateral with the Nepal Army Chief, PC Thapa. Under international protocols, this is considered to be a major step down. After all, it is the Chinese Defence Minister we are talking about. He is the first ranked state councillor in Chinese Premier Li Keqiang's cabinet. Anyway, we are not done with his Nepal visit yet. Reports say the Chinese embassy in Nepal had planned a lunch for the Chinese delegation in which all the former foreign and defence ministers of Nepal were to be invited. But after the reservation expressed by the Nepal government, even the lunch was stalled. There were no meetings granted with any political parties or top leaders either. In his 10-hour-long stay, all the Chinese Defence Minister managed were 2 courtesy calls with the Prime Minister and the President of Nepal, and the bilateral with the Nepal Army Chief. Now, Wei Fenghe was scheduled to visit Bangladesh next, but after a cold shoulder that he received in Nepal, the Chinese Defence Minister decided to call off that visit. The headline is on your screen now. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says, and I'm quoting, the visit will take place at a mutually convenient time. Suspension of the Chinese minister's visit is not anything extraordinary. This can happen. It surely can. Moving on, snubbed by the Nepalese leadership and the Bangladesh visit cancelled, the Chinese Defence Minister rushed to the ultimate state for help, Pakistan. What for? To discuss matters of mutual interest and regional security and to sign a defence deal. On Monday, Wei Fenghe visited the Pakistan Army headquarters in Rawalpindi. He met with Pakistan's Chief of Army Staff, General Qamar Javed Bajwa, and discussed ways to enhance bilateral defence cooperation. This was followed by the signing of a new Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, to boost the already close military ties. The details of the new MOU have not been revealed. Suffice to say, it was just a diversionary tactic by the Chinese Defence Ministry to try and save face after 2 consecutive and colossal embarrassments. The United States of America could be the first country to start inoculating its citizens. It had ordered at least 800 million doses and plans to roll out the first shots well before Christmas. The preparations have already started. Cold storages are being prepared. Vaccine doses are ready to be flown to different parts of America, all in the anticipation of the first round of approvals. 2 vaccine candidates have submitted approvals. The first one is the Pfizer shot. The second is from Moderna. Both companies are waiting for a nod from the Food and Drug Administration, the drug regulator from America. Here's what we know about America's vaccine rollout. Reportedly, 6.4 million doses are ready to be dispatched. Both companies have kept some doses ready. The decision on the Pfizer shot is expected around the 10th of December. The regulators could take a couple of more days to make their decision. While the Moderna shot is expected to undergo FDA review on the 17th of December, both of these vaccines are quite similar. They are about 95% effective. They are administered in 2 doses. Each company expects to have about 20 million doses ready to distribute in America by the end of this year. The rollout will be on expected lines. Healthcare workers first. followed by the most vulnerable citizens. These could be people with chronic diseases, care home residents, even police officers, teachers, bus drivers could be given the shot. So if you are watching us from America, if you are healthy and below 50 years of age, you will probably be last in line to get the vaccine. Moderna is the latest player to submit its vaccine candidate for approval. The company says its shot is more than 94% effective and 100% effective in avoiding serious infection. Those numbers are promising. What about the side effects? Moderna CEO says there are minor side effects, but the vaccine does not pose a threat to life.
For the safety side effect, it's very typical to what we described 2 weeks ago, what you see in approved vaccine. You have local, site injection pain, a bit of redness for some people that goes away. It's self-resolving within 24 to 48 hours. Those are for local side effects. And then for systemic side effects, you see some people have a bit of headache, some people have a bit of fever, some people have chills. Usually, again, within 24 to 48 hours, self-resolving without even taking an aspirin.
And so the vaccine makers are ready. What about the government? Officials in Washington say they are in a position to supply vaccines within 24 hours of approvals.
We at the FDA announced an advisory committee for December the 10th, and if everything is on track, everything proves out what it appears to be, we could be looking at approval within days after that. Moderna is basically 1 week behind that. And General Perna has said from Operation Warp Speed that we'll ship within 24 hours of FDA authorization. So we could be seeing both of these vaccines out and getting into people's arms before Christmas.
Now, this is a major step towards defeating the Wuhan virus. If America gives the go-ahead to its vaccines, it could prompt other countries to approve the same vaccines too. The world will have learnings to take from America's vaccine rollout. As other world leaders gear up for their own vaccine rollout, we will be keeping a close eye on these developments. There has been a lot of buzz around Indian Americans being a part of Joe Biden's cabinet. A plethora of likely names are doing the rounds, but so far only a few have been confirmed. This includes the 50-year-old Nira Tanden. The US President-elect has nominated Nira Tanden as the director of the Office of Management and Budget. This is a top position inside the White House, responsible for managing the administration's budget. 50-year-old Ms. Tanden will be the first woman of color to head the influential post. Let's tell you more about her. She was born in Bedford, Massachusetts, to immigrant parents from India, studied arts at the University of California, graduated from Yale Law School in 1996, and then went on to work at think tanks and various senatorial and presidential campaigns of the Democratic Party. She is currently the chief executive of the left-leaning Center for American Progress. Her nomination to the White House is set to be a part of Joe Biden's plan to build a team of liberal and centrist economy advisors. These advisors will be working alongside the Treasury Secretary nominee Janet Yellen. As head of the Office of Management, Nira Tanden would be responsible for preparing Joe Biden's budget submissions. She would command several hundred budget analysts, economists, and policy advisors within the next U.S. government. Accepting her nomination to that high-profile post, Tanden said, and I'm quoting now, "After my parents were divorced when I was young, my mother relied on public food and housing programs to get by. Now, I am being nominated to help ensure those programs are secure and ensure families like mine can live with dignity. I am beyond honored." Besides Nira Tanden, another Indian American is already a part of Team Biden, Dr. Celine Gondar, an infectious disease specialist who traces her roots to a village in Tamil Nadu. She was named to the coronavirus task force set up by Joe Biden earlier this month. Another Indian American who co-chairs Joe Biden's COVID-19 task force is Surgeon General Vivek Murthy. Murthy, whose family hails from Karnataka, received his bachelor's degree from Harvard University. He served as a Surgeon General under the Obama administration as well. But in 2017, he was asked to step down by the Trump administration. Murthy's inclusion in Biden's COVID-19 task force marks his return to mainstream policy making. Some more names are expected to emerge in the coming weeks. We will be giving you a better sense. On to the latest culinary clash to make headlines. South Koreans and Chinese are sparring over the cabbage dish kimchi. Our next report tells you what's cooking.
Kimchi, a fermented cabbage dish that now finds itself in the middle of a culinary war. Battle lines are drawn between South Korea and China. Let's tell you what's cooking. This is pao kai, a pickled vegetable dish from China's Sichuan. Recently, Beijing won certification from the International Organization for Standardization, or ISO, for pao kai. This was hailed by the state-run Global Times as an international standard for the kimchi industry, led by China. And that's where things got complicated. South Korea did not like the taste of that one bit. South Korean media jumped in right away. They disputed China's claim, accusing Beijing of trying to make kimchi a type of China-made pao kai. South Koreans were livid, calling China a thief trying to steal their culture.
I read a media story that China now says kimchi is theirs and that they are making international standard for it. It's absurd. I'm worried that they might steal hanbok and other cultural contents, not just kimchi.
I don't think that Korea is handling the situation that well. It is important to make our own food appealing to people all over the world. If we don't get that, it is our problem, not China's.
South Korean media even called it China's bid for world domination. On China's Twitter-like Weibo, Chinese netizens were claiming kimchi as their country's own traditional dish. As most of kimchi consumed in South Korea is made in China. South Korea's Agriculture Ministry on Sunday even released a statement saying that the ISO-approved standard does not apply to kimchi. They said it is inappropriate to not differentiate between the two dishes. This is not the first such spat. Just last month, South Korean K-pop band BTS faced backlash in China. The band's leader, RM, spoke about South Korea's shared history of pain with the US over the 1950-53 conflict, which China fought alongside North Korea. This time it is a conflict over the beloved kimchi, and the culinary clash is only heating up. Bureau Report, WION. World is one.
Russia and Ukraine have endured a rocky relationship ever since the breakup of the Soviet Union. The two countries are at loggerheads once again. But this conflict is not over a piece of land. It runs much deeper. It is a battle for ownership of borscht, a traditional soup made out of beetroot and cabbage. Here's a detailed report.
Chef Yevgen Klopotenko finds himself at the center of a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. He calls it a war for borscht, the traditional beetroot and cabbage soup recognized as part of Ukraine's historical heritage, which Russia also claims as its own.
In many shops in Turkey, Slovenia, America, you can find canned borscht where it says Russian soup. If you go to a restaurant abroad and there is borscht on the menu, the translation is Russian soup. It's just unbelievable.
Last month, Klopotenko brought a pot of borscht to Ukraine's Culture Ministry and convinced the officials to submit an application to United Nations cultural body, UNESCO, to list borscht as an intangible part of Ukraine's cultural heritage. Kiev is planning to submit the application before the March deadline.
We will register something bigger. We will register the culture of borscht in Ukraine and the tradition to cook it. We cook it so often that it has become a part of the culture.
The Russian government soon followed, calling borscht one of Russia's most famous and beloved dishes and a symbol of traditional cuisine. Moscow claims the soup is a national food not only in Russia and Ukraine, but also in Belarus, Poland, Romania, Moldova and Lithuania. But for Ukrainians, the battle over borscht is really about Ukraine's identity.
We must explain to the world that it is precious to us. For us, it is precious in our hearts and souls.
Ukrainians fear that after the breakup of Soviet Union, Russia is trying to appropriate the entire culture of Slavic region for Moscow. They say borscht was first mentioned in 1548 by a European traveller in his diary, who tasted the soup in a market near Kiev. They claim the dish arrived in Russia much later. Even Russian cookbooks over the years have mostly mentioned Ukrainian recipes for the soup.
How can I explain to a foreigner what borscht is? I always tell a foreigner that it is a dish that I ate almost immediately after my mother's milk. This is the first dish. This is a dish that I eat every day, which I cook for my children and my family.
For UNESCO recognition, Ukraine does not have to show that borscht is exclusive to their country. Only that it is entwined with their culture in things like weddings and funerals, and that it is consumed widely. Close to a dozen Ukrainian towns and numerous restaurants are also named after the soup. Things get complicated, as the soup holds an equal significance in Russia as well. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas, leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks very much for watching.
Gracias.